This is the very model of a modern major podcast. We are Fragments of Silicon.
Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. Joining me is two-thirds of the regular crew. Petty Fan has lost his microphone somehow, and
I'm sure it's easy to lose something when you haven't been in your normal location.
Yeah, we don't know the details behind the. Oh, he found it.
Okay. On us.
Yeah, it's like just in the nick of time. So, yeah. I guess you'll go first, Petty, because you've got updates to enlighten us.
Alrighty, so I saw the doctor on Monday, and he's unlocked my brace so I can go 30 degrees.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to start physical therapy on the 26th. He doesn't want me going upstairs till I see a physical therapist and they can judge my full range of motion, because he wants me at around 50 to 60 degrees before he wants me to try and tackle stairs.
Oh, come on, you can clearly hop upstairs on one leg.
Yeah, no. So yeah, that's been going on. Still waiting for stuff about my insurance, whole debacle. And yeah, just been kind of living. As far as gaming goes, I beat Spyro 3 with the Platinum Trophy, so now I need something else to do. Luckily, they're coming to take my CPM machine thing, so I can probably play on my computer more. So that's gonna be nice. And yeah, just kind of waiting for physical therapy and see where we can go from here.
Duly noted. Alright. Alex, you're up.
Been pretty low-key around here, I think. I got a lot of work to do at work this week, but that means I'm getting some extra hours, so that's not bad. Let's see, sorry, video game-wise, I have actually been continuing to play Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom a significant amount. Or not, yeah, Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, because it's fun. Right now I'm having trouble with a very frustrating, platforming puzzle, because this game kind of has those. So, yeah, not really a whole lot else going on, I don't think. Car and dentist issues are still up in the air, and we'll update when relevant.
Seems like that's a running theme this week. Anyway, Twilight.
Well, I have a functioning dryer now. I don't think I mentioned before, but my dryer that was here when I first moved in wasn't functioning, but finally today I got a functioning one. The landlord's maintenance guy got fixed. So no more trips to laundromat for me. I also have a lawnmower of my own now, finally. So I don't have to borrow anybody's anymore to mow the grass.
So you will know my pain too.
I actually like mowing the lawn, so it doesn't bother me.
Damn.
What else? Was having some issues with some black ants that were invading my house for a few days, but I think I've got that taken care of now. There's still a few running around, but that's a normal thing during the summer. Not really much else to talk about. Gaming wise, been playing one game that's for topic later on, and that's about it.
Okay. I guess it's my go. Let's see. A few days ago, I had my birthday. Actually didn't do anything on the birthday. It was more. I think I mentioned this last week. But it was there. Another year advanced. Let's see. I suppose the big news is it's looking like I'm going to be moving in the nearish future, let's say. I think I brought it. I've mentioned this on the show before, but I'm been watching some nearby construction, and yeah, that's actually not just on schedule, but ahead of schedule. So, gonna see what can be done about movement options and the like. There's no discrete timeline on this yet. It could be like next month. It could be next year right now. But that is a thing that's looking to be moved forward. That's another thing. It's not 100% sure that the ability to move is obtainable at this point in time due to various factors. So we'll see what happens there. And yeah, I suppose that's it for the news this week. So merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us for however many times it's been.
A lot.
It's John Pickett of MangaGamer.
Hello, it's great to be back.
Indeed. Let's see. Well, I suppose to start things, you've got a Discord now.
Yes, we do. We now have a Discord available. The link is available on our blog and on our Twitter profile. If you want to visit us at MangaGamer on Twitter, you can find the link to our Discord.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Anyway, so getting into actual games, I suppose we should resume with the expression Umbrelato, because it's now available on Steam.
Yes, it is now available on GOG, Discord, and Steam.
Yeah. So I suppose my question for this title is, did you end up having to alter the Steam version, or did you end up winning that particular fight?
We did end up winning that. The Steam version is nothing edited, and Steam basically realized they were wrong.
That is good to hear. I remember that being a point of extreme contention last time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's the expression Armaletto is now available on Steam. If you didn't want to pick it up from MangaGamer or one of the other stores, you can do so. But I suppose the big game to talk about is the latest in the Higurashi releases.
Yes, the Chapter 7 Minagoroshi. This is the next to final chapter of the Answer arcs. It focuses in more on the character Rika, and especially more notably the character of Hanyu, who up until now has not really been a character, because until this chapter, Rika is the only one that has been able to interact with her, and up until now you didn't really get to follow the story from Rika's perspective.
I suppose I have to take your word for that, because I've never played a Higurashi game. I've watched some of the anime and all that stuff, but and I suppose that brings me to a question if someone were to make this their first Higurashi game, how confused would they be?
Probably quite a bit. Because this is the next to last answer arc, so it already assumes you have a lot of knowledge about sort of the general flow of events throughout the story.
Right.
Also, lots of people die, going by the name of it, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, so one of the, actual main plot points behind this particular chapter, Chapter 7, that they deal with sort of in the very beginning is Rika is watching as the characters are avoiding all the mistakes that lead to the previous chapters. And it's the fact that everyone is managing to basically avert the catastrophes that people who have followed the series are already familiar with is what gives her the courage to become more of an active player in this particular chapter.
And how much more Higurashi is there, after the answer arc?
So obviously there's the next chapter, the 8th chapter, and the answer arcs. Mm-hmm. After the answer arcs, since we are releasing the full Higurashi When They Cry Ho collection, the next episodes in Higurashi would be Higurashi When They Cry Rei, which is a series of 3 chapters that expand on several concepts throughout the story. They were originally created by Ryukishi as sort of a thank you to all the fans that supported and followed the series so far. So that it adds a couple little details. Like there's it has one chapter that is goes into a bit more detail about what it is like for Rika to be in this time loop, and
spoilers. There's a time loop.
Yeah,
it's kind of the central focus,
and so, and then one of the chapters is also basically sort of like the prelude to I think a fan made game that was that Ryukishi authorized, so that expands sort of on the story of that. And it's a couple little, and then I think one is basically just a comedy chapter with the characters being hilarious. In addition, and then with Higurashi When They Cry Ho, that one in particular adds 2 chapters that together present a completely alternative series of events that are not so it's the same characters, same setting as Higurashi, but it is sort of completely separate from the original story and has to deal more with Hanyu and something that the original doesn't really go into very much, but others like Hanyu that exist in the world as a whole, and how they interact and sort of how their interactions can affect the world and the setting. And that chapter, that story, like I said, it's kind of an addition to Higurashi, and ends up sort of playing more in sort of the overarching ideas of some of the themes and possibilities that exist in the When They Cry series as a whole. Because obviously there's Umineko, which is a completely different story, different characters, and then there's several other When They Cry titles that Ryukishi has made. And then in addition to those, the last chapter of Higurashi When They Cry Ho is basically the original prototype for the entire series, which was the theatrical drama screenplay that Ryukishi wrote for Higurashi.
I'm like, sounds about right. I swear, you need a flow chart with some of these Japanese media franchises.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just and now when it comes to the fan works, are those things that you're authorized to localize, or are they kind of beyond the scope of your license currently?
So probably the biggest one that fans of the When They Cry series would know of would be like Higurashi Daybreak, and that's not something that we have the license to. It might be possible. We'd have to look. The more often than not, the biggest issue that comes up when it comes down to like trying to license fan works is making sure that all the like music and sound and other assets that are used in developing those titles are permitted for commercial use. Because
Right.
a lot of times those groups will use things to create the game that are allowed to be used within the context of it being a doujin game, but not when you're trying to sell it as a sort of official commercial product.
I'm like, yeah, it sounds about right. I mean, that's kind of what goes along with fan games. You know, they'll use official assets in gray area capacities, let's call them.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, they may have like even official blessings within a certain scope, and usually that scope stops when we're talking about commercial releases.
Right.
Not always, but like I
No.
think. In fact, I think you've released some of those. Like, what was
I mean, we have, and there's also been points throughout our history of releasing the Higurashi When They Cry series where we've had to update some of the music or soundtracks at the author's original request because of things like that, where some of the tracks are like where he had tracks developed that would be specifically under his control and not necessarily, free to license or from somewhere else. And so there's been minor updates like that to cover some of those issues, even in the history of our release with Higurashi. So,
okay, that makes sense. You know, it's all about that's all within the confines of playing within the rules of the game. Let's say. Now, in regards to the next release of Higurashi, how far along is that?
The translation and the editing are completely done. So it's a matter of getting the programming finished off and then sending that off to beta test. And then we'll be able, once the beta testing is complete and the errors are fixed, then we'll be able to find a place for it in our release schedule.
Sounds pretty standard. I mean, I wish I had more, but it's kind of hard to talk about an individual Higurashi chapter in too much depth, especially at this point in time, because it's all connected.
Yeah, at this point, a lot of the stuff that happens in the chapters is going to spoil the earlier chapters of the game.
Right, and it's like. And yeah, this isn't a franchise you really do have to get in, from the beginning. And it's not something that you can.
Well, it's a mystery. For mysteries, you start at the beginning.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's why you got to start at the beginning, because entering in this in the middle of an arc is going to be very painful in terms of following things for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
No. Anyway, so let's see. Anime Expo 2019.
Yes.
You've had a bunch of announcements. Let's see. First up is Endless Torment.
Yes. The latest title that we will be releasing from the creators of Kuroinu and the author of Euphoria.
Hmm.
It is it's a very dark story, to say the least.
Uh-huh.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm like, well, it's got the title Eternal Torment, so, that's not exactly a title that brings to mind happy thoughts.
No, the game Eternal Torment focuses on a woman who lives in this sort of post-apocalyptic world, and she manages to escape from her owners, since she is a slave. And she manages to encounter sort of the eternal king that is ruling over this post-apocalyptic domain, and after their encounter, he curses her with immortality as well. What follows from that is, needless to say, several scenes of her abuse at the hands of the townsfolk living around in the castle town, and others that are sort of trying to vie for control and ownership of her. But during that struggle, she manages to basically find a portal that sends her back into medieval France. And the story then sort of follows her life as she lives through several different time periods, including medieval France, the American frontier, Meiji era Japan, all while these, villains from where she originally came from are hot on the pursuit of her tail, and basically trying to recapture her, reclaim her, and take her back as their slaves. So there's a lot of choices in the game that represent the player and her trying to evade recapture, and of course there are plenty of bad ends to go along with what happens when you fail to escape your pursuers.
That is certainly an interesting premise, concerning as well, because we are dealing with some, quite frankly, heavy themes, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And basically what I'm getting at is, I'm hoping this game does not shield hero it. That is to say, slavery is kind of a touchy issue in this day and age, as it should be. And
yeah, it doesn't really portray slavery as good.
Yeah,
slavers are definitely vile people.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at here, because that's what Shield Hero basically does. It's basically glorifying and condoning slavery, which is no. Like I said,
her goal is to avoid going back into slavery.
Like I said, it's one of those topics that shouldn't be hard to tackle, but current day anime has kind of been whiffing it on certain things. And there's a lot that we could go into in that particular yarn, but that's kind of beyond the scope here. Anyway, so how far along is Endless Torment at this stage?
That one is quite a long ways. It is a much longer title, so there's still a lot of translation work to be done on that one.
Well, I suppose how long is this? Is this one that has a lot of voice acting in it?
Oh yeah, it's fully voice acted.
And is this a full-on Arrows title?
Yes, so one would generally. It's one of those ones where it has a very strong mix of both story and sex scenes, because obviously With this game, the bad ends are not short. There are the bad ends when you fail to evade capture are much more extended ends with multiple scenes showing her fate. And so there are a lot of sex scenes in there through that. The main story, and obviously you have to you sit through kind of the original series of scenes where she is abused by her captors before she even escapes through the portal and sort of moves on to the main plot. So you definitely have to sit through a lot of dark sex in the game. So it's, reader beware.
It sounds like it. Sounds like there's a few content warnings in that package. Oh boy. Let's see. Moving on. Let's see. You got Rance Oh, is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, so we announced both Rance 01 and Rance 02. Which, obviously, Rance 01 is the very first Rance ever created. Specifically, the version that is 01 is the most recent remaster of the original that Alisoft created. So for fans of Rance, this, you'll finally be able to experience the story that started it all in much better graphics and, updated to work on regular computers instead of, say, Windows 95.
That was a while ago. I suppose it could have gone back further. PC.
It might have. I might be full of shit. It might have gone back further.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, what is the Rance series?
The Rance series is a series of basically adult JRPGs created by Alisoft that follows the anti-hero Rance. And Rance, of course, is a very, very powerful adventurer in the world in which he lives. But he basically only ever really does anything heroic to bang hot chicks.
Sounds like it sounds like something that's very much, well, maybe not modern, but that sounds like something that worked well in the 90s. It's like, I'm imagining that this game is kind of similar to 90s harem anime. At least certain regards. Or is that not in that comparison?
I was going to say, he's not nearly as... when I think of 90s anime, I think of sort of, the clueless protagonist that doesn't understand that, women want him. And that's very much not Rance. Rance is much more... in many regards, he can be kind of a jerk, kind of an asshole, kind of a dick. But he's very clear about what he wants. He's very confident, very, I'll say assertive would be a nice way to put it.
I suppose. So how long ago was this new remake put out of Rance 01? How modern is this?
I want to say it was released in 2013.
So, not too long ago.
Yeah. And then, of course, Rance 02 is basically sort of similar situation where they remade the second Rance and re-released it with updated graphics, updated basically everything.
How many Rance games are there at this point?
So in terms of like official chronology, Rance 10, which we've already licensed, is the final episode in the series. So there's the main 10, and I think there was a handful of spin-offs that happened along the way.
Yeah, I could see that. I might.
Because I know there's like the Kichiko Rance that's a spin-off. I want to say there's like Galzu Island that was focused more on like the monster girls than the Rance series, and there's a couple others like that.
I'm not too familiar with the Rance series, so I have to take your word on that. Especially like the spin-offs.
Yeah.
Let's see. And the final announcement I think here is Funbag Fantasy Side Boob Story 2.
Yes.
Like.
So Funbag Fantasy Side Boob Story 2 continues the story of continues the main story of Funbag Fantasy that leads into Funbag Fantasy Side Boob Story. Only this time the story takes place on the island nation that is the main setting for Funbag Fantasy 2, which is the prequel to the Funbag Fantasy series.
Wow, that was a lot more convoluted than I was expecting. I'm like...
Short version, guy loves big tits. There's a lot of girls with big tits. He ends up ruling a nation, and now there's another game in the series with more girls with big tits and more breastplay.
Not so much the premise, but just the release. Like, okay, that's not what I was expecting. But anyway, it's like trying to. I suppose the question here is, what goes on in this particular installment of Funbag Fantasy? What hijinks are gotten up to?
Yes. So, minor spoilers for sort of the earlier in the series, but Lute at this point in the game, Lute, the main hero of the Funbag Fantasy series, has become the ruler of the kingdom and has already dealt with several episodes of political turmoil at home. And so in this series, it starts off with Lute is missing from the kingdom. People do not know where he is, and his harem of queens are sort of keeping it a secret from the kingdom at the moment. But meanwhile, there's this sort of mysterious masked man who has washed ashore on the island kingdom, missing his memories. He is arrested for washing ashore for public indecency because he washes ashore naked and doesn't realize it.
Of course. And
when he goes at where he is imprisoned, he ends up sort of uncovering that there an illegal smuggling operation that's being run from the prison, and so they conscript him on this suicidal mission to go slay a minotaur. And the story sort of progresses from there. And I don't want to get into too much more detail because I don't want to spoil the fun for the fans who are waiting to enjoy this series.
Makes sense. And I suppose my next question is, is there a... How do I... Is there a proper Funbag Fantasy 2 game out there?
Yes. The translation beta testing for that is actually just finished. So we will be working on seeing that brought to release soon enough.
Okay. Right. So what is your upcoming convention schedule looking like at this point?
Our last convention for the year is going to be Anime NYC in November.
That's further than I was expecting. But have you done it Anime NYC before?
This will be our third year attending.
Okay. And I'll see if my colleagues here have any final questions for you at this point.
I think I'm good.
Yep.
I'm
Sounds like you got some good stuff going on, though.
I'm good.
Okay. All right, then. So, John, as usual, it was lovely having you on the program.
Yeah.
I'd like to invite you on, let's say, October 2nd.
Alrighty.
All right. So until then, we hope the games that you have announced here find release dates in between. I know nothing's quite set in stone yet, which is why not.
Well, we do have, we did announce at Otakon, we did finally announce the release date for Sango Garance.
Okay.
That is, for many, that is sort of the Rance game that got many current modern English fans into the series. We will be releasing that officially on September 12th. So fans who are interested can come check it out on our website and enjoy being Rance and playing, a strategy game where you conquer all of Japan.
Sounds good. All right. Twilight, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. This week we are talking about Turok, Dinosaur Hunter. Reason being, the Turok 2 Seeds of Evil game is coming to the Nintendo Switch tomorrow. Or wait, if it's not... actually, I'm seeing the official release date as Friday for some reason. Odd. But, yeah, the point is Turok 2 is hitting the Nintendo Switch in 2 days. And indeed, the first Tarak game hit the Nintendo Switch a few months ago. And thus, the circle is complete, in a manner of speaking. That is people who are familiar with the Tarak franchise know it started, in its video game journey on the Nintendo 64. What you might not know is Tarak is actually a comic book franchise. Very old one at that.
And the comic books were still about, like, a Native American person killing dinosaurs with increasingly technological weapons.
I think the Acclaim Comics version was that. It's like this... the franchise originally got started in, like, the 1960s. By a completely different publisher, like Gold Key Comics, and by the time Acclaim got the license, and honestly, I never read any of the Turok comic books. It's especially notable because the Turok N64 games don't really have a delineated storyline. In fact, there are different Taroks. Like, Tarak 1 stars a guy named Tal Set.
It's like a code name / title / whatever.
It's a mantle, basically. And the next Tarak is Joshua Fireseed. And now there is continuity between Tarak 2 and Tarak 3. Yes, there was a Tarak 3. Not a lot of people know about that one because that came out in the year 2000 on the Nintendo 64, and only it's like the year 2000 was when the N64 was winding down. Still a lot of games in production, but the sales of N64 games was cratering that year. Let's say. Maybe you could go back as far as like 1999 for that. I mean, the year 2000, the Dreamcast was out. The PlayStation 2 hype was immense. It's not a big surprise that Turok 3 that's the one that people go, wait, there was a Tarak 3? When people think of Tarak 3, they actually think of Tarak Rage Wars, which is an interesting title because Tarak Rage Wars is a arena shooter that was made for a console that had no online infrastructure at that. I'll be honest, I never really played Tarak Rage Wars because just honestly the concept never interested me. It's like, yeah, let's play this multiplayer focused title on this multiplayer only title on a system that only has four slots, and quite honestly wasn't the best at doing it. I mean, I know there's a lot of nostalgia for Goldeneye, and
split screen was never actually ideal, especially since TVs used to be
right.
smaller.
I mean, it's like, but I see a lot of people asking for Tarak Rage Wars. So I guess a fair amount of people bought it. I mean, though, when it comes to what people think that in terms of Tarak games, it's definitely the first two. And if you've never played the Tarak games, well, I'm like, thankfully they've been modernized and updated and are about as close as they can be, or at least the first one is. I mean, there've been some minor adjustments. Tarak 2 is actually, the Night Dive port has actually had more work done on it because apparently they couldn't find the source code. So they had to, kind of rebuild it. And, the level design was kind of messed with. But, I was fine with that because, okay, Tarak 2 has some really fucking bad level design. It's like, I've never legitimately completed Tarak 2. Not back in the day. I played the remake last year, and the Lair of the Blind Ones still sucks all of the ass. The Lair of the Blind Ones can go fuck itself. And that's not a controversial opinion. The Lair of the Blind Ones is considered to be an ass-tacular level by general consensus. And just in general, the Tarak games do have a lot of late 90s eccentricities, let's call them. Thankfully, not all of them survived to the modern day because the Tarak 1 and Tarak 2 games that are available are not actually based off of the N64 games. They are based off of the PC games. The first two Tarak games did get PC releases, which really helped bring them into the modern age. Now, technically speaking, the Tarak games are actually an amalgamation of the PC and N64 games. Like, for example, they had different soundtracks, and you can access them both in the modern versions. On the flip side of that, Tarak 1 and 2 do have a lot of 90s eccentricities, so if you're looking for that, you will find it here. This game is a lot faster than modern shooters, for example. And also considering it's no longer constrained by the N64 hardware, this game, especially Tarak 1, lightning fast. You'll be hitting at least rock solid 60 FPS, if not higher, which isn't a surprise because the games look like they came from the late 90s. This was a remastering in the truer sense of the word, as in resolutions have been updated and there's a lot more graphical options. But at the end of the day, the poly counts and the geometry and all that stuff, they're still clocking in at late 90s levels. So, it's still going to, Tarak is still going to look like a game from the late 90s. Like that's really like the difference between a remastering and a remake. You know, it really is more literal than you think. Remastering, well, you are bumping up the resolution. You're adding in widescreen. You might be adding post-processing effects. That it's like, or maybe little additions. Like for example, Turok 2, the modern version has a lot more map notations. Also, you can save anywhere in these versions. Once again, that's because they're based off of the PC versions. You could save anywhere in the PC versions. You could not do that with the N64. And that was a big complaint with the N64 version of Turok 2. It could be like 45 minutes in between checkpoints. And it wasn't so much if you died, because there's a live system here. It's still in the game, but it's utterly pointless because, this operates like a first-person shooter that you can save in. So you really don't need lives. Just one of those affectations they couldn't get rid of. Turok is known for its weaponry, especially Turok 2, known for having one of the most inventive and controversial weapons in all of FPSdom, and it's the cerebral bore.
Mm-hmm.
It's like here the thing is, as nifty as the cerebral bore is, it's kind of an assy weapon.
Yeah, it's not mechanically good. It's a gun for people who really want to shoot out a bug thing and have it burrow into its opponent's heads and see the heads explode.
Right, and it might not even be able to do that. It's kind of a weak weapon. Honestly, you're better served with a lot of the more mundane weapons.
Yeah.
Another notation is the nuke weapons of various sorts, the ones that have a lot of particle effects. You use that too much, you could get some performance issues, at least on the Nintendo Switch. At least that's what I've heard. But yeah, it's like Turok is a game with a lot of weapons. It's very shooty, very jumpy, especially the first one. The first game is pretty has a lot of notoriety around its first-person jumping. Thankfully, once again,
I'm bad at that at the best of times.
Yeah, thankfully that's something that's been reduced in the PC version. You have much better control than an N64 pad. Turok Dinosaur Hunter was considered to be something of a landmark in the realm of console first-person shooters. Really, I think this was the first fully polygonal 3D FPS to be found on a console. I really can't think of anything else that predates Turok in that regard. It's not the first first-person shooter developed for a console by any stretch of the imagination. Even though those were few and far between. That's kind of what the N64 did for FPSs. It was the first system that really did them good. Outside of a few exceptions, for example, Disruptor on the PlayStation. I think that came out in '96.
I mean, it's kind of gone by the wayside now, but the N64 controller was literally designed. Part of the reason it has the three things is so it has a formation that's optimized for FPSs.
Keep in mind, the N64 was the land of one analog stick, so figuring out...
Yeah, it only had the one analog stick, but it had another way of either moving while you look with the analog stick, or move with the analog stick and look with the C buttons.
Right. That was Tarak's grand solution to how to deal with FPS movement on a console. Honestly, probably was the better way with the C buttons and the analog stick used for looking around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, once they realized you could do two analog sticks, obviously that was better. But remember, when the N64 analog 6 at all was new, so.
Well, guess what game invented that? You probably won't believe it.
Mario 64 had camera on the.
Yeah, no, I mean the inventor of the two analog stick method of controlling FPS.
Oh, yeah, I have no idea. I'm not good at FPSs.
It was Goldeneye.
Oh, was it?
Yes. Goldeneye actually had several options for two analog sticks. The thing is, you had to have two N64 controllers to do it.
Oh, it was one of those games?
It was the game.
The only other one that I know of is fucking Star Wars Pod Racer.
I'm like, yeah, it was one of those games.
One where you could use two N64 controllers to control the game. In Pod Racer, you
could
with two
use
controllers. Each engine is separate.
Yeah, I mean the arcade version of that had the real, as real as that thing could get sort of deal. Since pod racing doesn't actually exist, but they had, what this would be like if you could actually do it kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, GoldenEye used two analog sticks for movement and aiming. Once again, that was only certain control options, and it was really awkward because holding two N64 controllers was really awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you don't actually have a ton of buttons when you're holding it that way.
It's like GoldenEye did it first. I think it was like either Alien Resurrection or Medal of Honor Underground. One of the late era PlayStation 1 FPSs that actually took advantage of the DualShock analog controller that did it goodish. I mean, as good as analog sticks can get for FPSs. Which is admittedly not all that good. All these years later, and I still really don't like using the analog stick for FPSs. What? But anyway, yes. So the first two Tarak games are generally well regarded. Tarak Rage Wars has its fans. Tarak 3, kind of unknown.
So did they stop making them just because they weren't as popular? Just regular sales reasons, or was there a license issue?
Okay, so why did they stop making Tarak games? The answer lies with Tarak Evolution.
Oh.
I'm like, Tarak Evolution was the PlayStation 2 era Tarak game, released. I'm trying to remember if it was. Yeah, Tarak was 2002. One of Acclaim's more hyped games of the era, also subjected to their stupidity in terms of marketing. For this one, Acclaim or one of their marketing partners got the idea of promoting the game via giving money to people, to couples who would name their kid Tarak.
I get what you're going at, but
yeah, I'm like, no, I don't know. I don't know why they did this shit. Not the only goofy marketing tactic that they did. Believe me, that's a whole other episode. Not their dumbest, not their most egregious, but it was up there. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Tarak Evolution, released for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox. Generally considered to be mediocre at best. I played it. I rented it back in the day. Hated it. It's like, honestly, I don't remember too much about it. Because, once again, it's been about... I don't know, like maybe about not quite 20 years, but it's been a while. And, I do remember like some of the reviews mentioning that it was like a step back from Turok 3 in terms of game design. And just there's not a lot of conversation around this one. Generally because it's considered to be a pile of shit. Like, and it didn't sell well. Like, this one did get released on the PC. It's just nobody's asking for Tarak Evolution to be revived. Like, I've literally never seen anyone mention, yeah, hey, let's bring back the game that basically killed off the Turok franchise for a measure of time. Not the last Turok game that would be released. Indeed, there was a go at reviving Turok in the late 2000s with just Turok.
Without the Dinosaur Hunter subtitle?
Yeah, just Turok. This was a weird one in terms of release because this was released by Disney Interactive Studios. Yeah, it says Touchstone Studios on the actual box art, but okay, so here's how Disney used to release mature related stuff. That was through the Touchstone label. I don't think they really use that anymore, mainly because Disney, like, if something isn't making $1 billion at the box office, they are not making it. And, they don't think any sort of rated R material will be able to do that under their banner, or sub-banner, as it were. But yeah, in about 2008, Disney Interactive Studios, with their development arm, Propaganda Games. No joke, Disney had a studio named Propaganda Games. I'm like,
I'm trying to figure out the logic there.
That's a little too on the nose, even for Disney.
Yeah.
But yeah, the game was released for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and a little later for the Microsoft Windows in 2008. And honestly, I never played this because, quite frankly, and all the reviews seem to back this up, it seems like a very typical late 2000s FPS game, which doesn't really endear me to it. It's like, I'll be honest, I really don't like this era of gaming. The
fairly early 3D era was awkward.
It's not the fairly early 3D era because we're talking 2008. Oh no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking more about like the aesthetics of everything.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's like, this is really gray and brown and gritty and realistic. It's trying to be fucking Call of Duty, Gears of War, that whole not direct aesthetic, but it's very much the gritty reboot of Turok.
Mm-hmm.
It's got its fans, but like I said, and the game could be different than what I'm imagining it. I'm just saying this is the thing that it always exuded. Like, it was just another FPS game from that era. And I could be wrong about this, I will admit, because I've never played it. I'm just saying what it looked like, what it resonated, what all of the marketing seemed to suggest that this is a gritty.
It's the dark and gritty version of Native American with like spirit connections, shooting dinosaurs with the bow and arrow that shoots fucking like sci-fi exploding arrows.
And how they did that was basically to rip off Aliens. Because of course. yeah, it's like I said, this game just did not interest me back in the day. Like, but
I think there's more to be gained by embracing the inherently silly nature of a lot of what Turok is.
Yeah.
Once again, this game was released in 2008.
That was very
That was the
accepting of being unironically silly.
Yeah, that was like the peak of video games taking themselves way too fucking seriously all the fucking time.
Yep.
It's another reason why I'm not very in love with that era. I mean, you know, it's like this is how we got like Bionic Commando 2009. You know, a game that was so fucking self-serious that it wandered into parody with its stupid fucking storylines and shit. Like, you know, the whole your wife is your brain is your arm or whatever. You know, it's like that is a really fucking ridiculous plot twist. But you know, they're not fucking smiling. They're not, you know, it's not even an ironic nod to how fucking stupid an idea that is. It's played completely fucking seriously. And it's goddamn awful. Like I said, I really, really fucking hate this era of video gaming. Anyway, so yeah, that Turok game was released by Disney. Came across as just another FPS game. Had the sales of just another FPS game of that era.
Just another FPS game without a big existing franchise name.
Well, I mean, that was kind of the idea behind using Turok. Like, that was their big franchise name. Like, yeah, it didn't really work out too well for them. Like, sales were apparently okay, but not enough to justify a sequel in the eyes of Disney. They were working on a Turok 2 game, but it got canceled. What we don't really know what that was going to be. Like, I'm not sure if it's. I don't think it's leaked yet. I'm like, but believe it or not, this is not the last Turok game. Behind the scenes, the Turok, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but Classic Media ended up with the Turok license or something like that. Basically, the Turok license is in the hands of NBC Universal. And a while ago, they had kind of they had this competition via various Classic Media franchises, and the develop games around these. Not big games. Long story short, we've got a new Turok game out. Turok in the Lost Valley, I believe it's called. Let me just check here. Thought I had this open. Oh, it's Turok Escape from Lost Valley. Nobody was really expecting this from a Turok game, in the sense that it is
crossing over with Land Before Time.
Not too far off the mark.
I know that's the Great Valley, but
not too far off the mark. But here's what this thing looks like. Like, it's an isometric action game with a really
it's very cute.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of got some news coverage because, this is about as further of an idea of a Turok game as you can get while still being a Turok game.
Yeah.
I mean, you're still a Native American fighting dinosaurs.
And you're literally trying to escape the Lost Valley. Apparently, this is based more off the comic material, which makes sense, and the original Gold Key comic material. At least this is what I've heard mentioned. I have no idea. Once again, I've never read the 1960s comic books, or really any of the Turok comic books. Game seems to have gotten pretty bad reviews. And
Steam has it as mixed.
it's like, and I've seen professional reviewers tear into it. One of them even calling it like the worst game they played all year. I don't know how true that is because I am not going to spend $15 to find that out. Like, I'll be honest.
It looks cute at least.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Okay, it's a nifty little idea for a Tarak game, but absolutely not what I'm looking for in a Tarak game. And indeed, Turok also had some Game Boy incarnations that were reformulated games because doing an FPS on a Game Boy Color, not an impossible task. There were some of those, but you weren't really going to see that done on a wide scale, let's say. So, Turok...
It's really hard with D-pad, 2 buttons, and start and select to deal with moving and, you can do a first-person dungeon crawler because you don't have to, and then, when you have to do the shooting in a dungeon crawler, it, shifts to a thing where you can no longer move, but you can move your reticle.
Yeah. Long story short, on that, Turok 2, Turok 3 on the Game Boy family of handhelds, those are platformers. Once again, I have no idea how they actually play because, I had no interest in playing Turok on a handheld device. I'm willing to bet they were probably pretty bad because that's kind of how those things worked most of the time. If not bad, then they were really, really bland. They could have been good. I don't know. Once again, they don't really get talked about. But they do exist. And there's not a whole bunch of outpouring to see the Turok Game Boy games revived either. Not even necessarily a quality issue. Just, Game Boy games were a lot more ephemeral than console games. Due to various factors. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that's basically the video game life of Turok. Really big franchise in the N64 era. Mm-hmm. Crashed and burned in the PlayStation 2 era. Had an attempt at a revival in the late 2000s. And got the indie game treatment this year. And overall, I liked the N64 Tarak games. I'm glad that the first 2 have been able to come back for modern audiences to experience. Mm-hmm. Also really glad to see them on Nintendo consoles. Also worth noting, the Nintendo Switch version of the Tarak games, they are getting physical releases later in this month, I think. So if you want, if you want to go, it's via limited run games. So if you want to go that route, you can. They're clocking in at $30. Coming August 30th. So once again, also since they're limited run games releases, make sure you focus in on the window. It's not a thing of limited run games I've ever been especially happy with, but
I mean, it's a limited run. That's how it works.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally in the name. It's they don't do big print runs of these. Though you can find some of them have been released to major retailers. I've seen them in Walmart and shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just not a lot.
Yeah, and I think it definitely depends on the game. The Turok games, I could see this happening too. I imagine that these will sell out pretty fast, but it's not a game that I think of that will sell out insanely fast.
Mm-hmm.
But I could be wrong. It's like, and yeah, I suppose that's about it for Tarak at this stage. We'll be revisiting this in a few weeks because Night Dive is coming on our program, although we'll be mainly talking about the Blood Remaster. But I'm pretty sure we'll get into Tarak a bit because, once again, the Tarak games have hit the Switch, or are about to hit the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something people are probably going to hear about. Also, people have been asking for these games on the PlayStation 4. Not sure we'll get an update on that, but I know people have been really, really wanting Night Dive on the PlayStation 4, outside of like System Shock. So, anyway, that'll about do it for Fragments of Silicon this week, or rather this day, because the week ahead we actually do have a Friday interview coming up on Friday, August 9th at regular time. None of this 9 in the morning shit, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, we'll be having Robert Waller of Waller Digital. We will be talking about the hook-based puzzle game Sinker 2. Still need to play that. Probably do that, if not tomorrow, then Friday morning. And let me see. We on the Sunday reviews, we have reviews slated for Defend the Keep, Devious Dungeon 2 for the Nintendo Switch. Yes, that will be a Gollux review. Mm-hmm. And Dark Roll, a free marble rolling game. And yeah, Defend the Keep.
Marble rolling is a little bit underselling it.
Well, I'm like, it's another game in the vein of like Kotor Rimpa and Marble Madness and Archer McLean's Mercury. It's a ball rolling game.
Right, except for like it's like a dungeon crawling RPG type dealy where you're a marble.
I suppose in aesthetics. Yeah. And Defend the Keep is a tower defense game. Honestly, this game is kind of running into a contender for worst of the year. I'm like, more on that on Sunday. So until then, until Friday, I wish you good gaming.